Hello and welcome to our ORF discussion today, where we're going to be analyzing Pakistan's newly released national security policy. Now, the public version of the document is around 60 pages long and it discusses the different challenges that Pakistan faces with regards to its economy, internal security, foreign policy. It discusses its relationship with other states, and it supposedly is supposed to identify policy objectives and opportunities where Pakistan can work on these challenges. At the outset, the document states that it is a citizen centric framework. It places economic security at the center of national security. But is this truly an attempt for the Imran Khan government to look inward and reflect on the challenges that Pakistan faces? Or is this just virtual signaling born out of a need to sort of placate an international audience? Is this proper policy, or is there a lot of things which are problematic? In today's conversation, we hope to unpack the policy in detail. And joining us to discuss it is General Hooda, who is a former general in the Indian Army and is a keen Pakistan observer. We're also joined by Ambassador Raghavan, who has served as High Commissioner to Pakistan, and Sushant Sareen, who's a senior fellow at ORF. Thank you so much for joining us to discuss this. General Hooda, if you could just start us off and give us your general thoughts on the policy document. What are some areas that you think the policy is deficient, or is there some substantial policy idea? What was your first take on reading it?
Thank you, Kriti. Thank you, and great to be on this very distinguished panel. So I'll just, broadly run through what I think are the key points of the national security policy. Obviously, not going to be covering everything, and then my initial sort of impressions. So as you initially brought out, the Pakistan national security policy, as it's outlined, keeps economic security at the core in order to strengthen both its defense and human security. I mean, that's what it says right at the outset. India is still seen as an immediate threat because it talks about, without directly naming India, it talks about regressive ideology that has taken root in the neighborhood, and that has increased the prospects of violent conflict. And to counter this, there is still a huge reliance on nuclear deterrence for deterring war. And I'll talk about this a little in my impression, although it just forms a small part of the NSP under the heading of strategic stability. But it's apparent that Pakistan continues to rely on nuclear deterrence against India. The policy also outlines, the challenges of terrorism and violent extremism in the country. And while it currently identifies the problem, I think the prescriptions and what it subsequently says are problematic. And again, in my impressions, I'll talk about that. On Jammu and Kashmir, so there is no direct call to reverse, the August 2019 decision, but the kind of language that has been used on, human rights violations by India, crimes against humanity, talks about support to people of Kashmir. My own impression is that what they're doing in Kashmir is something that they're going to continue. It also seeks to improve relations with India. I mean, that's what it says directly at the beginning of the section on India. But again, the language is problematic. I mean, after stating that, to talk about Hindutva-driven politics, India's military adventurism, attempts to impose one-sided solution, I think to a large extent dilutes what they are trying to say, that we need to improve, security with India or relations with India. What are my quick impressions? So my impressions, Kriti, are that while the NSP identifies some of the problems, the prescriptions are too simplistic. And the prescriptions are not borne out by actions on the ground. And I'll just give two examples. Firstly, on economic security. It talks about the problems of external imbalance, horizontal and vertical inequalities in the economic situation. But then it just sort of makes light of them. It says Pakistan is economically resilient. It has a vibrant economy. It has a geo-economic location. I mean, as I said, it seems like you're making light of a problem. One more statement let me give you on the economy. It says, Pak wants to have policies that brings it into the middle income group of countries. Now, for getting into the middle income group of countries, I mean, the current GNI, gross national income of Pakistan, is around $1,300. It will have to increase this fourfold to reach there. So just making sort of simplistic, suggestions uh, on violent extremism again. It says violent extremism ideologies cannot be allowed. But please see what has happened in the last 2 3 months, particularly with the Tehreek-e-Labbaik in October, November, when after protests around protests around Lahore, the ban on the party has been lifted. It was an outlawed party. The leader has been released. The funds have been released. So, I mean, to say that we won't allow violent extremist ideologies, but the situation on ground is different. Secondly, you made a key point that some of this is aimed at convincing the global audience about Pakistan's seriousness towards fighting terrorism. So it talks about Pakistan's successful 2 decade war on terrorism. It talks about projecting Pakistan's positive reality to increase its negative image. So I think some of this is only aimed at attempting to show the global audience that look, we are serious, and our focus is on human security, on economic development. As I said on India-Pakistan relations, I think the language used is an indicator that the hostility will persist, and we could talk about that again. And obviously, India's sort of key demand of taking action against terrorism has not been taken. And my final point is this reliance on nuclear deterrence. I think it has created an echo chamber in Pakistan's strategic circles that here is this which will deter any kind of conflict or war with India. I think it just doesn't take into consideration how India looks at the space between conventional and nuclear war fighting. And so I think this is only going to add to instability. So I will end here with some opening remarks, and then we can take some issues later. Thank you.
So we'll unpack slowly the different things which they discuss about India. But if I could come to Ambassador Raghavan next, General Hooda saying, of course, that it's simple prescription. There's not enough policy. But given all the talk that the document has about putting economic security at the center, is that even possible? Given that for 7 decades, Pakistan is in the economic freefall it is in today by putting traditional military security at the center. Um, so is that even possible? Is there any way that they can actually reverse that and put economic security, or is that just good statements to read out on paper?
Well, a lot of it is, of course, good statements because there are structural issues which Pakistan has to address before it can think of improving its overall economic situation. But as far as this document is concerned, if one sees it in a peculiarly Pakistani context, and this is really my starting point, you see, what it is trying to say is that Pakistan, for all these years, has had a somewhat deviant notion about security. And that deviant notion is that it has believed that national security is the same as national interest. I think this is what the subtext of this particular document is, that in fact, national interest is a far wider construct than just national security, and which is why it brings in geoeconomics and the importance of bringing economics into the center of the security debate and so on. Now, this point is, as I said, from a particularly Pakistani context, not without its relevance, because the central issue which Pakistan has faced for many years is that a security-driven apparatus has decided overall government policy with, on the whole, disastrous consequences. So you can say that in that sense, it is putting a new paradigm or is trying to construct a new paradigm. My problem with this policy is that, yes, of course, it's a step forward in a Pakistani context, but it's too small a step, because to say economics has to be at the center of everything, it's like going back to the kindergarten. And in fact, given the kind of debates which have been taking place in Pakistan about the wrong choices it has made for the last 10 or 15 years, such a small step appears almost regressive. And this is really my problem with the document, that perhaps, given its limitations, given the fact that it's in the end going to be a statement of intent, but you don't find the kind of advance which could have been expected given the circumstances Pakistan is situated in now. So there's not enough candor about the choices it has made so far, and for a course correction, what are the new choices which would be required. And as General Hooda said, a lot of the central issues are just passed over with a platitude or a statement of good intent in the expectation that this is enough. The fact is that uh, if a document of this kind coming from the government of Pakistan is to be taken seriously, it must have much more substance in terms of the new choices which confront it than this exhibits.
So Ambassador Raghavan is saying, of course, that it's too small a step. Would you, one, agree with that assessment? And how much of the policy, so if there are particular areas, has the touch of the military? General Bajwa, of course, has spoken in the past about the need for Pakistan to set economic priorities and economic policy. But in what way do you think that this policy better serves the security establishment?
Look, I'm not very sure that if this policy serves anything really. I think it's basically a continuation of the past, and it's they've repackaged it. They've thrown in some nice jargon, which has resonance in the world these days. But beyond that, what has changed? What is the paradigm shift? Even, and Ambassador Raghavan is quite correct, that there has been a lot of talk in Pakistan that now, and they've put it in this paper as well, that economics is going to be the core of national security. Yeah, fine. I want to be a billionaire. What, it's a statement like that. Uh, and then these guys have been talking about how geoeconomics is now going to drive their strategic policy. But that was what was being said until this document came out. In this document, however, you can see a certain kind of a nuanced approach in which they now say that geoeconomics is going to serve as a kind of a supplement to furthering, the geostrategic focus of the country. So even that focus which they were, tom-tomming about, that henceforth it will be all about geoeconomics, has been watered down in this particular document. So one is, I see this more as an image building exercise, telling the rest of the world that look, Pakistan is now has made mistakes. Pakistan is a country, and as General Hooda says, it kind of highlights some of the problems which Pakistan faces. And so they are coming out clean with all of it, and now they want to put the best foot forward. All very well, but then again, as General Huda very correctly says, what are the prescriptions? If you look at what they say on how they want to address the economic crisis, which is almost becoming an existential crisis, and if you look at the data in the Pakistan economy, and I'm not talking about the fudge data which spin doctors of the Imran Khan regime keep coming up with. I'm talking about actual hard raw data, and you start making projections 5 years, 10 years from now, it is very clear to anybody who has any modicum of knowledge of economics that this country is not coming out of either the kind of debt trap in which it finds itself in the next 5 to 10 years. It's not coming out of that, number one. Number two, I think the economic distress levels in Pakistan are only likely to increase going forward. And what are the prescriptions these guys offer? I can give you my daughter's class 12 economics textbook. Those are the prescriptions, at least in this document which they've offered. Control fiscal deficit, increase productivity. How are you going to increase productivity? No answer to that. No clarity on that. They talk about policy consistency. Where is the policy consistency in Pakistan today? Uh, is there any sign under this particular government which changes secretaries to government, chief secretaries, you name the officials, they change them like people change clothes? You've had how many? Four finance ministers. You have had about 6 or 8 finance secretaries. You have had about 7 or 8 chairmen of the Federal Board of Revenue. And then you talk about policy consistency in this paper. It's laughable. So, frankly, I don't see any merit whatsoever. On India, again, the same old formulation, nothing new, absolutely nothing new, except for that one line which, certain liberals in India will latch on to, that look, Pakistan wants peace with India. Do you actually expect them to put in a document that no, we want a 1,000-year war with India? They're not going to do that, especially when they're, coming up with a document which is addressed to the international community more than anything else. So, frankly, I don't know. I've not really found anything of any value in this document, really. So I won't say I'm disappointed because I never expected anything much out of this document, anyways.
Fair enough that there's a lack of policy consensus. In the document, it also there's a discussion on defense and territorial integrity, where they discuss the opportunities and challenges about securing Pakistan's border. It says it gives special attention to lingering disputes with India. Uh, how General Hooda, it also mentions the Durand Line and other border management initiatives. How do you see Pakistan's sort of these initiatives to manage borders to their west vis-a-vis what's been happening at the Durand Line over the last few weeks? How do you see them proceeding on that front with the Taliban?
So I think most of the border has been fenced, but as I don't want to go back into the history of the Durand Line, and the problems that have been there, the fact that Afghanistan, irrespective of which government has been in power, has always been sort of against accepting the Durand Line. So you're going to find we've already had two incidents in the last month and a half on the Pakistan Afghanistan border. We've had incidents of mortar firing on both sides that have taken place. So I think as far as the issue of the border is concerned, it's going to remain sort of alive. Will it spark off into a sort of a major confrontation between Pakistan and Afghanistan? I don't think so at this stage. So it will remain simmering, but I don't think it'll spark off something larger.
Ambassador Raghavan, your thoughts on the same, and also what is it now that the Taliban has been in power for almost for 5 months now? What is the relationship of the Pakistani state with the Taliban today? What is it that they would want from the Taliban now? Now that they are in power, what is it? They've been faithful and loyal. What are some of the main concerns that Pakistan would have with the Taliban now?
Well, on the Durand Line, I agree with General Hooda that while it will remain as a issue, and you will see certain tactical symptoms of that issue from time to time, as we are seeing now, it's not going to become an issue which will assume major proportions in Pakistan-Afghanistan relations. The fact is that regardless of the rhetoric, which there has been a consistent rhetoric in Afghanistan for 70 years or so about the Durand Line, all the governments which have been over there, including two foreign military occupations, have by and large accepted it. So while it will remain as a tactical irritant, I think, for all times to come, nevertheless, both governments will try to manage it so that this irritation doesn't cross certain limits. Your question about what expectations does Pakistan have from Afghanistan now is a very good one, because I don't think many people have thought about this in Pakistan also, because their approach always was that bring about a change of architecture in Afghanistan so that the strategic threats which Pakistan faced, whether real or imagined, those strategic threats are neutralized. And one of the principal strategic threats, I think, which they imagined they face was the huge Indian presence or the Indian footprint in Afghanistan. Now that that change of architecture has come about, what are their next steps? In fact, nobody really knows. I think what they would probably want is some extent of moderate Taliban behavior so that international aid flows can resume in a more meaningful way, some element of diplomatic recognition so that there is greater stability to the Taliban regime. But beyond that, I don't think they have any great expectations of how much the Taliban will deliver. And I think the Pakistanis, at least the Pakistani establishment, has a good understanding of the mindset of the Taliban, that this is not a forward looking government which is going to transform Afghanistan in economic terms or in terms of connectivity and so on. So, what Pakistan will try to do is to try to see how it can extract what it can for its own immediate purposes. But I don't think they have any great expectations beyond having a minimum stability and ensuring that the Indian presence remains diluted.
Ambassador, what about the TTP? Would Pakistan expect the Taliban to have some influence there, rein them in? What are your thoughts on how the TTP has regrouped and the threat that they pose to Pakistan's internal security? Because there's no sort of acceptance of the fact in the national security policy document, of course, but your thoughts on how the TTP will factor into Afghan and Pakistan relations?
My own sense is that the Pakistanis feel quite confident about handling the blowback from a Taliban resurgence in Afghanistan.
Mhm.
They are confident that they can handle the blowback in Pakistan without too much difficulty. Now, whether this is a correct judgment or a misjudgment, we don't know. But certainly, this kind of approach comes out of something which I had said at the beginning, which is a national security guided view of national interest. So when the Pakistanis say that we can believe that they can handle the blowback, they are in fact trying not to see the consequences of even a limited blowback. And the consequences of even a limited blowback in Pakistan will be quite severe in terms of business confidence, in terms of what the economy, how the economy will take it, the overall picture or image of Pakistan. I think these are factors which get underplayed. And this is why I agree with what Sushant said, that while the document talks about bringing geoeconomics into the center of the debate, it is doing so to achieve national security goals. And that is really where the problem arises, that you don't see a dilution of the security driven approach or a highly securitized approach to each and every one of Pakistan's problems.
Sushant, while we're talking about the TTP, there's a lot in the document in which Pakistan says that there should be greater interfaith harmony, greater cooperation with religious scholars from different schools of thought, etc., etc. While Pakistan has consistently done the opposite of that repeatedly and has co-opted these violent religious groups, what sort of implications do possible negotiations with the TTP and co-opting the Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan? What implications do those have for its internal security?
No, I don't see how they are going to be able to manage to incorporate or mainstream both TTP as well as TLP. Uh, you know, that's like almost yin and yang kind of a thing. The two will not match. Uh, there are just too many ideological and other problems between the two. Number one. Number two, on the TTP itself, and I agree with what the assessment of both General Hooda and Ambassador Raghavan on the Durand line. I think it will remain an issue. It will remain an irritant. There could be that occasional clash. Those clashes have been happening for the last 70 years. Along the border, somewhere along the border, they'll keep making a song and dance about the fencing, etc., etc. That has a political resonance inside Afghanistan. The Taliban can use that to show that they are not Pakistani puppets. The Pakistanis can use it to tell the world that look, the Taliban continue to agitate over the Durand line. If they were our proxies, they would not be doing something like this. So that game will continue. The real problem is going to be the TTP. And where that problem comes in is that, yes, Ambassador Raghavan is right in reading the Pakistani mind, that they think they'll be able to handle the fallout. But already we are seeing the fallout. And the moment the fallout starts, and this fallout is likely to only increase going forward. Now, there is some talk inside Pakistan that there will be some kind of, what in our parlance we used to use the term hot pursuit. that there will be those kind of operations, there will be covert operations inside Afghanistan to take out some of these TTP guys. Now, if you carry out those kind of operations, I think it will tie the hands of the Afghan Taliban also. Beyond a point, they cannot turn a blind eye, whether it is the Haqqani network or anybody else, they cannot turn a blind eye to what the Pakistanis intrusions into Afghanistan. So that becomes a potential that has a far greater potential for exploding in Pakistan's face than anything to do with the Durand line. Now, a link to that is this larger concept. See, I'll just read out one sentence from on the importance of Afghanistan as far as Pakistan is concerned. The Pakistani say that Afghanistan's potential as a gateway for economic connectivity with Central Asia is a key driver for Pakistan's support for peace in Afghanistan. But if you have the kind of fallout of the TTP actions, then this connectivity goes for a six. So the whole geo-economic and that entire economic connectivity projects and all of that, dreams which the Pakistanis were harboring, come crashing down. Now, so TTP becomes a major problem for the Pakistanis. And how they're going to be able to get around this, one doesn't know. Secondly, on the issue of terrorism, I think it's a very interesting quote. If you, you know, it, they just give me a second. I'll just tell you. Yeah. So the policy says Pakistan pursues a policy of zero tolerance for any group involved in terrorist activities on its soil. Now, either there is a problem with the grammar of how this thing has been framed, or the Pakistanis actually mean what they are saying, which means that any terrorist activity on its soil, they will have zero tolerance for. But any terrorist activity happening from its soil into other countries, they have 100% tolerance for, which we are seeing, whether it was Afghanistan or India or any other part. So there is no clarity on this. Now, the moment you get into this kind of a thing, then all bets are off. Then that whole concept that, we are against extremism, you cannot be against extremism if you are going to allow terrorist groups to run amok in your own country, or at least run amok not in your country, but run amok in other countries, but let them operate with impunity within your country. You can never fight extremism if you are going to succumb to forces like the TLP and other such organizations. How will you fight extremism when you have somebody as crazy as the Rahmatul Alameen Authority chairman? If you read his rants and his writings, it's shocking that this man is going to now be in charge of an authority which is going to spread tolerance in Pakistan and going to fight extremism. But I have never heard a much more ridiculous thing in my life. You know, so just the sheer and then of course you have Imran Khan. Uh, of course, the point is that this document which we are discussing so with so much of keenness uh, probably will not last more than a couple of weeks, which is as long as Imran Khan's government is likely to last, if the rumor mills are anything to go by in Pakistan. And as somebody once said that rumors in Islamabad are nothing but premature facts. Sometimes they mature and sometimes they don't. But as of now, the rumors are that this government is on its way out, and so will this policy be on its way out. But if let us assume Imran Khan serves this term and serves the next term as he just ranted a couple of days back, uh, look at his own attitude. Look at the fact that his entire approach on Islam. Where is the tolerance in that? Where is the concept of fighting extremism in the way he approaches it? Has he done anything to stop the forced conversions in Pakistan? Has he lifted a small finger to do that? Even today, you are hearing reports of Hindu temples being destroyed, including some of the most holiest Hindu shrines, including the Hinglaj Mata temple. There has been an assault on that just a couple of days back. So, you know, you can write whatever you want to write, but ultimately everybody is going to judge you by what you are doing on the ground, and what you are doing on the ground is what you were always doing on the ground, which is nothing.
General Hooda, your thoughts on what Sushant said, and if we're judging Pakistan by, should be judging Pakistan by their actions and not their words. You had spoken a little bit about what the document says about India at the start. So while it says that it has a desire for peace with India, in the same breath, it sort of talks of India's arm build-up, it's pursuing unilateral policy action, spreading disinformation, Hindutva politics. Given all of this, why would Pakistan even want to talk to India? If India is the sole cause of all of Pakistan's problems, why does it feel necessary to include the fact that it desires peace with India in the document?
No, so I think as I think Sushant also pointed out in a document, they are not going to say we want war with India. And as we've, I think, all discussed earlier, a lot of this document is also aimed at the global audience to say that we want peace. And again, this idea that we want peace with India is not something new. I mean, we've heard statements from almost all political leaders, military leaders in Pakistan saying we want peace with India. I think the problem is while you want peace with India, the way that they view India, and you yourself commented on some of the statements that they've made about regressive ideology, about a unilateral approach by India to change things. On the Indian Ocean, they talk about a nation wanting to be a net security provider, obviously meaning India, and therefore this is actually a sort of a destabilizing kind of effort. The way they talk about the ideology, etc., that has taken hold within India, India's military adventurism. So therefore, I'm saying stating one thing and its actions on the ground are completely different. So you get an idea about what Pakistan establishment is thinking about India. And so just making a bland statement that we want peace with our neighbor actually doesn't make any sense unless we see some actions on ground. And again, those actions on ground, after all, what is it that India's core concern is? India's core concern is terrorism emanating from Pakistan, and we find absolutely no change in that. While there is some action against the TTP, I mean, the Jaish, the Lashkar, the India-centric groups are completely free to do what they're doing. Infiltration is continuing. I don't know if you read a recent sort of survey that has been done by Christine Fair on the Lashkar-e-Toiba and where the deaths of the cadres take place. 94% deaths of LET cadre take place in India. What does that mean? That means infiltration continues. They continue to come in here into India. So it's nice to hear that, yes, Pakistan wants sort of peace. But, as they say, unless you put the money where the mouth is, I mean, really, I don't think it's going to make too much of a difference.
Ambassador Raghavan, if we could talk a little bit about Kashmir. Repeatedly, the government has said that, we are not going to trade with India, we're not going to talk to India until they go back and they revert to all the changes, go back to pre-August 15, 2019, August 5th. But the document does not mention a reversal of those changes, even though it's something they've been demanding for a long time. Does this mean Pakistan has stepped back on it, or what can we make of that omission from the document?
I think Pakistan is mixed up on it. Certainly, the August 2019 legislative changes led to a huge outrage in Pakistan, and the government felt, and all the stakeholders felt, that something big had to be done by them, which is why they made this series of announcements about no ties, banning trade, etc., etc. Now, the problem they are now confronted with is that how do you reconcile this very advanced position they took with regard to the legislative changes with their traditional position on Jammu and Kashmir, which is that India has no locus standi as far as Jammu and Kashmir is concerned, and it's a disputed territory, and its accession is not recognized. So they have to reconcile the fact that they are now demanding the restoration of the legislative assembly and the separate statehood status, with the older position that this legislative assembly and this separate state had no legal standing or had no status, and the whole thing was a farce. So I think they are unable to reconcile this particular position, and it's not going to be easy for them to do so. Possibly, what we will see are tentative probings to see whether we can also do something which will help them reconcile these two widely divergent positions. Now, it is a fact that because of the outrage in Pakistan, which accompanied the August 2019 changes, they took decisions which were driven more by sentiment than by a clinical approach, because they would have been quite within their limits to say that these changes mean nothing at all, because the disputed status of J&K has never been in doubt, and we don't recognize the Indian administration at all. So it doesn't matter what pro forma changes that administration carries out, which has in fact been our position with regard to POJK and with regard to Gilgit Baltistan. But because they let sentiment drive their entire approach, they've landed up in a bit of a problem of how to reconcile this demand now that they should be statehood for J&K and the legislative assembly should be restored, etc., etc., with the older position that this statehood was meaningless. But this really brings us to the larger question of India Pakistan relations, which both Sushant, Sareen, and General Hooda commented on. The fact is that the problems which we face with Pakistan are not new. They are not, it's not as if these have emerged with this government, or the issues which underwrite these problems have emerged with this government. Whether in Pakistan or in India. These are old issues, and the question really is for both countries whether you're happy with this state of affairs, or do you want to bring about some changes which will impart more stability to your bilateral relationship. Now, I don't think a situation will ever arise that you will ever have a totally friction free relationship with Pakistan. It's not going to happen. But can you have a situation where there will be more stability in your relations with Pakistan? I think it's something which is worth trying for, even though while the odds against this may be uh, quite formidable from time to time. But it does mean that we need to also take a closer look at our own approaches. If we want a situation that there is a substantially reduced threat of terrorist attack from groups in Pakistan soil, is that your objective or is that your starting position? Because if it is a precondition, then you cannot also make that into your objective. If it is an objective, then you have to see how you can how you can trigger a set of changes in Pakistan where you achieve that objective. My point simply is that given the long background of India Pakistan relations, it would be unrealistic to expect that Pakistan will do all the heavy lifting to impart stability to the relationship without your also taking some steps.
Sushant, would you agree with Ambassador Raghavan's statement, as well as your thoughts on, were you surprised to find the omission from the document in terms of not stating that they don't want a reversal of the August 5th changes?
So, on what Ambassador Raghavan said, look, purely theoretically and in a perfect world, what he says is right, that we should not expect Pakistan to do all the heavy lifting, and you know s- some of it will have to be done. Some reciprocation will have to be done with us. Uh, but frankly, I am not entirely sure that is how international relations work in the long run. Countries do tend to take very tough positions and strong positions and try and sustain those positions and hope and work towards making the other side, uh, in a sense, yield to their stand. I don't think we've done enough to make the Pakistanis yield to what we want, provided we are clear about what we want. And There again, I agree with Ambassador Raghavan that perhaps there is an element of lack of clarity on what exactly we are aiming at vis-a-vis Pakistan. What is, and I think that lack of clarity is equally there in Pakistan. What is the kind of a relationship uh, we want with them and they want with us over the next 50 years? Where do we want to go from here? So I don't think that thing is very clear. Uh, I'm kind of agnostic whether we want to continue with what we have over the last 75 years for the next 75, or we want to break this logjam. I don't care. We can go either which way, but provided we are clear which way we want to go. So that is one part of it. The second part of it is, as far as this particular document is concerned, look, the moment you make an irredentist claim and make it a vital national security objective or policy, or interest rather, uh, which is what they this document says, that Jammu and Kashmir is a vital national security interest. Now, the moment an irredentist claim is made into a vital national security interest, uh, how can there be any movement forward? What is, how will they agree to any kind of a livable compromise on something which they have reaffirmed to be a vital national security interest? And if their irredentism is what is going to drive their policy towards India, because that is what they've said, that J&K is not only a vital national security interest, it is at the core of the relationship between India and Pakistan. To me, that is a deal breaker. There is no way that you can move forward. And if you can't move forward, then I come down to what is called the theory of the second best, that if an ideal situation is not possible, then any step which leads you, or you think leads you towards an ideal situation, is not the best thing to do. Then you have to look at some second best option. So is our second best option to continue with this kind of a conflictual relationship, and make the Pakistanis ultimately yield to our will rather than us yielding to their will? So I think we need to really apply our minds to this particular conundrum, and come up with a much more clear-headed policy. Unfortunately, in India, everybody who comes to power in Seven Racecourse Road thinks he will be able to break the logjam. He will be able to make the change. The Pakistanis will be so impressed with his personality that he will be able to do everything possible to clear all the the obstacles in the path, and India and Pakistan will become great friends. And then there's a reality check within a couple of months. So I think, as a people, as a country, as a nation, we need to be very clear which way we want to go. And frankly, we haven't really applied our minds on that.
Ambassador Raghavan, in the section on which Pakistan discusses its relationships with what they say the rest of the world, it discusses its cooperation with the United States and how that will continue in Afghanistan. How do you see Pakistan's relationship with the United States evolving now? It says in the section that it doesn't subscribe to camp politics. What is the camp politics that they're referring to? And how do you see the relationship with Washington evolving from here on?
I think by reference to camp politics, they have in mind the U.S. China divergences and how their own proximity to China puts them in many people's eyes as being in an adversarial camp as far as the U.S. is concerned. So this, when they say that no, we are not part of any camp, this is what they are trying to correct. But U.S. China, U.S. Pakistan relations are from a Pakistani point of view, I think a big cloud on their horizon. And while they have achieved certain objectives in Afghanistan, one of the big downsides of achieving those objectives has been the impact it has had on the United States. Uh, I think they are again grasping at straws about what to do about it, and their hope is that some new thinking will emerge in the United States itself, because they themselves really have very little to offer at this stage to the United States which it would be seriously interested in. But it is a big cloud on their horizon because, regardless of the relationship with China, the overall dependence on the United States, uh, and not just in economic terms but also in social terms, is quite huge, and the fragility which has crept into that relationship after the change in Afghanistan worries them greatly, but they don't really know how to go about repairing that relationship. Uh, I think the problem which this document ignores is the larger issue about Pakistan's overall image and how uh, its internal developments have dented that external image so immensely. And this is again another aspect of its flirtation with these extremist groups and giving the wide pass which they have to propagation of extremist ideologies, and the impact this has had on all its external relationships. So I think this is an area where again the this new policy does not address frontally, and it is a disappointment because this is something which many Pakistani government officials had been speaking about in public with much greater candor for almost 10 or 15 years, that our internal developments are really damaging our external relationships, apart from having the impact on business confidence and on flight of capital, etc., etc.
General Hooda, your thoughts on what Ambassador Raghavan said. And also at the start, you had spoken about how the document mentions that the Indian Ocean is becoming a space for contestation. How do you see Pakistan sort of balancing its relationship with the US and with China going forward?
So, Kriti, we are clear both the U.S. and Pakistan have concerns about their bilateral relations. So we've had U.S. Secretary of State saying clearly that we are going to review our relationship with Pakistan in view of all that has happened in Afghanistan. And similarly, the Pakistani leadership, the foreign minister, has been talking about a need to reset ties with America. We know Imran Khan is very upset that he hasn't got a call yet from President Biden. That seems to sort of indicate the state of relationship. Uh, I'm not sure Pakistan and the US can actually move in any sort of positive direction in their bilateral relations. I'm not saying there'll be a break, but to expect any major improvement is unlikely. And I say that because you see Pakistan going more and more into the Chinese camp. And while they might be saying that they don't want to get drawn into this global power politics and the competition between the U.S. and China, it's clear that the Pakistanis are drifting towards the Chinese. You see, the clear example is that Biden's Summit for Democracy, which Imran Khan refused to attend. And he refused to attend only because the Chinese were not invited and Taiwan was. You see the statements that Pakistan has made on boycott of the Winter Olympics. And they've said we should not bring in sports into politics. There is huge growing dependency on arms imports from China. And so I see the CPEC. I just see that yes, while the US and Pakistan will continue to say that, we will remain engaged with each other, my own personal view is that, we see a drift of Pakistan towards China. And that is going to put some kind of tensions in relationships between Pakistan and the US. So that's my impression. What Sushant said, I think, is critical on. We need to have a clear strategy towards Pakistan. Now, whether which way do we want to go? What are our objectives? As Ambassador Raghavan said, clarity, and then what is the approach that we need to follow. Once that is clear, I think a long-term thinking about how and what we want to do with Pakistan I completely agree with Sushant. Every political leader who comes thinks he's going to fix it, and we saw that with the current political leadership also. That we are going to be able to do this based on our sort of uh, you know personalities, based on our relationships between two leaders. And we saw huge chemistry between Rajiv Gandhi and Benazir Bhutto. But there are underlying fundamental issues that need to be addressed, and those fundamental issues can only be addressed if you have a clear sort of strategic thought process on how we need to deal with Pakistan. Kriti.
So, Shank, we've discussed the policy in detail, we've criticized it, we've highlighted its contradictions. But if we, just for the sake of it, if we had to take one positive sort of takeaway, could there be a positive takeaway that at least Pakistan has realized that something has to change? Is this an attempt, even if it's a feeble attempt, to be slightly inward looking, to sort of lay out that these are our problems, even if there's no policy framework on how to achieve them? Can we give the government a little bit credit for looking inward for the first time, or no?
Look, three things. One, this is basically a kind of a collation of all the kind of stuff which you hear in the media, in on the electronic media, social media. All the nice things which you hear. This is a collation of all of that. Number one. Number two, I think it's a document which is written in reasonably good English, so that is one positive to come out of it. You normally don't have sarkari documents having such reasonably good English, so that is one good thing out of it. And maybe I'll be charitable enough and come up with a third positive, which is that it's actually the kind of document which a fresh intern coming into a think tank would write, uh, where everything like motherhood and apple pie is very good. So that kind of a document, moral science kind of a thing. There is no hard nosed, uh, you know, strategic thinking in this particular document. There is none of that bold vision which Imran Khan writes in his message in this particular document, which is there. Uh, so none of that is there. So nothing to actually commend, for somebody like General Hooda, Ambassador Raghavan, or me, or you for that matter, since you are one of the upcoming scholars on Pakistan. I have not seen anything of any merit, but I'm sure maybe some other people have found something which tells them that maybe something is changing. These are self-evident realities and self-evident truths which have been put into this particular paper, and they've been put out there simply to make it a little more credible than what it otherwise would have been. If one of Imran Khan's spin doctors had written this paper, they would have said everything is hunky-dory, nothing needs to change. We are the most hip and happening country in the world. We have the most booming economy in the world. Like Imran Khan says, I have the lowest inflation in the world. All international figures say his country is the third most inflation infected country in the world. He says, my prices are the lowest in the world. I'm the cheapest. He is the cheapest guy, but he says the country is the cheapest country in the world. Now, so it's not as it does not lack as much credibility as his spin doctors like Fawad Chaudhry and others would come up with. So the same guy who found Transparency International to be the most trustworthy organization today debunks its report because it goes against his regime, and it exposes his regime as probably the most corrupt over the last 15 years, right? Now, so the one thing to commend this document is it's not written by one of those characters, and they have pointed out some of the problems which Pakistan faces, which gives an element of credibility to this document for people who don't know Pakistan. But other than that, for anybody who knows Pakistan, frankly, there's nothing in this document.
Ambassador Raghavan, your final thoughts on the same? There's obviously a lack of credibility. The document doesn't sort of highlight what the real problem with the Pakistan economy is. They're highly dependent on foreign assistance, chronic borrowers, plagued with violent religious groups, low on almost every human development indicator. So is this entire document just sort of a wish list in terms of these are the things that we want, and or is there anything concrete that we can take away from it?
Well, I've already said that the document is a disappointment, and you're quite right that it is more of a wish list than anything else. But having said all that, I think it is important to also mention that what a document of this nature tries to do is to start an internal debate. Now, one can say that the debate it is attempting to start, in fact, has been an ongoing debate in Pakistan for many years, if only people cared to hear, which is that your strategic policies and your national security policies are driving the economy into the ground. This is what many Pakistanis have been saying for decades, but nobody cared to listen to it because of the kind of mindset which runs the place. Now, perhaps if one has to find something positive in this document, it could be that this is a voice, if not within the establishment, at least within the quasi establishment, which is also saying that you have to pay attention to the economy, otherwise, nothing else is going to work. So, to that extent, yes, it's a good point. But as I said, this is so obvious a point that for it to be stated at this level after so much consideration does appear to be somewhat of a disappointment, even within a particular Pakistani context. And this is, I think, one of the reasons why so many Pakistani commentators have expressed some extent of disappointment that this is just a collection of platitudes and it doesn't go as far as could have been expected given all that has happened in Pakistan in the past 2 decades.
General Hooda, I'll give you the final word. It's easy to sort of set up a framework, have the text, and have no framework to implement what's written there. Uh, can this even be implemented, given that there's been no debate, as Ambassador Raghavan said, that it's important to debate these policies in civil society, debate it in parliament, sort of get an all-party consensus. Uh, how much political will would you need to even begin implementing this, given that none of the other parties have been on board with the drafting of this policy? How do you see the document in that light?
So, Kriti, as per what is given out, I think this NSP has been in the making for the last 7 years. So, it would have started with the previous government, and they say they have, taken a lot of experts and scholars. And I know the opposition political parties are saying that they've not been taken on board. Let me just echo the sentiments by Ambassador Raghavan and Sushant. So the problems are identified. They've said these are the issues. I think the one positive is at least they're admitting there are issues about the economy, there are issues about violent extremism, sectarianism, etc., etc. Where I think the document fails is that it doesn't go far enough, as both Sushant and Ambassador Raghavan has brought out, in giving out some significant bold steps in how we are going to tackle it. And therefore, very simplistic sort of answers are given, very simplistic solutions are sort of made out. We will not accept violent extremism. I think if this is the start and there is further debate on this and it gets refined and they actually move in the direction that they want to, then I think we will say, yes, at least it's a public document in which, Pakistan is committed to a certain line of approach, a certain strategy, a certain policy. And if they consistently sort of move in that direction, then it's fine. But otherwise, I think, there will be skepticism about the document. Maybe if we can have a discussion after a year and see, has anything changed? We might come to some more concrete answers. Thank you.
Thank you. While the document is, of course, we have consensus that it is a great exercise in creative policy writing, but it does fall short of creating an appropriate roadmap that governments and even successive governments can follow and implement. It gives out no bold steps on how Pakistan can achieve its supposed goals. Of course, if Pakistan is supposed to reflect, then it's going to require, like General Hooda said, political consensus, cross-party understanding of the policy, constant debate. because without that political will and a framework to implement the policy, meeting any of the goals that it lays out is going to be impossible for Pakistan. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me today, and hope to have more such discussions in the future.
Thanks, Vidhi. Thanks. Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you, General Hooda. Thank you,
Thank
Ambassador.